Data Import Exercise 1, Basic Datasets. Today I'm going to take you through importing data into the Doric Observatory, which is powered by Origin. All of the training material covered in this exercise is available on the Doric training system and can be found by logging in and going to the training resource library, where you will find all of the Excel documents used throughout the training, as well as a document outlining step by step each of the exercises. So the first exercise we're going to look at is how to import a basic dataset into the system, and we have an example dataset of NES data which is available and can be downloaded easily from NES. This data is available at many different geographic levels, but for this example we're going to look at middle super output area. So this data set is already available in Excel. You can see it has 3 indicators which we call dimensions within the system. We have New Deal for young people, 25 plus, and for lone parents. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up a new data set within the Doric system. Once I log into the system, I'm presented with different menus, and the data management is done under the Data Admin Manage Datasets. Dataset management is where we go to list all the datasets that we have created within the system. You will also see listed all templates that are used to create datasets. Dataset templates define the geographic structure of the dataset that you want to load. So examination here, we can see that there are many templates set up to allow us to create different geographic structures. So one of the first activities we have to do is examine the structure of the dataset we want to import to make sure that it is fit for purpose. In this case, we're looking at data that is available at MSOA level, and we can see that the MSOA codes are available in column E, and this dataset also happens to have some district level data as well. So what I'm going to do is first of all locate the template that I want to use, and we can do that by typing into the filter box at the top of the list. So we have set up in this system templates that span the entire Doric or Cheshire region. So if I simply type star Doric star, that's going to filter this list of 67 templates down to all the ones that span Doric only. On a quick examination, I can see that we have one template here that is to be used for MSOA and LA data. Once I find the template that I want to use, I simply click the copy link. I'm given a warning. Within the system, it's possible to copy the structure of any dataset, so that's useful to know if you're replicating datasets that you've previously created. Once I click OK, the system will then generate a new dataset for you based on that template. So in the new dataset page, we're presented with a number of forms to complete. Data is logically arranged into a number of tabs. As you can see along the top here, we have metadata, we have standards, we have geographies, variables, import, and security. So we're going to start off by filling out the metadata. The metadata form comprises of a number of fields which tell the system how to describe the dataset to the end user, and also controls a number of other characteristics of the dataset. First off, we have dataset name, which is the name that's presented to the end user who views the dataset. So we're going to call this New Deal Program. Next we have the theme where the dataset resides, and you can see there are a number of pre-configured themes in the system. These have been set up by the system administrator. But for now we're actually going to leave it within the test data thing, just until we're happy to publish it, and at that point we'll probably move it into economy or whatever theme is appropriate for the dataset. Next up we have custodian. Now custodian defaults to the user who's logged in, so that should be yourself, and it can only be changed by the system administrator or a portal manager. Then we have type. Type determines the type of data set that it is, so we have options such as nest data if we want to connect to the neighborhood exchange. But in this case, standard variables allows us to import Excel data, so we're going to actually set it up as a standard data set. Browser mode determines how the end user is going to see or query this data set. This is useful in large data sets that maybe have thousands of geographies, in which case it's maybe not appropriate that the end user can view all data in one go. So in that case we would use the select data option only. That forces the end user to build a query to view the data. And alternatively we have both options, so we're going to leave that on both options. Then we have a number of checkboxes here. Enable import should be checked by default. One-off, this is a useful option if you're loading a data that isn't collected over time, or and basically what it does is it tells the system not to alert you that it's due for any type of updates. We're going to leave that unchecked in this example. The archive data speaks for itself. It's an easy way to take a data set offline. Then we're going to go down to what we call our standard metadata, where we have things such as the data source. Again, defaulting here to Doric, but you would pick whatever is the appropriate data source. So I'm going to pick the Office for National Statistics for this data set. The frequency tells the system how frequently this data is collected. And again, these are pre-configured by the system administrator, so if a frequency type that you anticipate loading data for isn't available here, you need to liaise with your system administrator to set that up. So for this example, we're going to simply pick calendar year. And we also then have options for standardization and ranking. I'm going to leave those alone in this exercise, and we'll be coming back to those in some of the later exercises. We have last updated and next update, and we don't actually have to set these. The system will set these during the import process. So we're going to allow the system to control these dates, but I can override them if I wish here. We then have a number of other fields that can be completed. We have what we call private notes. These are notes that you as the data custodian might want to note beside the data set. So, for example, in this case, this data came from the ONS Neighborhood Exchange. You might want to make note that that's the case, so that you can easily access it again. And over on the right hand side we have first of all the public notes, which are notes that are available to the general public when they view the metadata for the data set. I'm not going to complete those right now, but you can enter any free text that you want into that area. And then down here we have what we call our reference links. This allows you to provide URL links to other websites that might be of interest to anybody viewing this data set. So for example, you might want to enter in a link to the NES Exchange website. So I'm going to just type in NES here and put the URL within here. And once that's completed, then we're ready to save our changes. So I'll click that, and when the screen refreshes, that's our metadata complete. So having completed the metadata, we're now ready to configure the variables for this data set. Before doing that, I'm just going to quickly show you two of the other tabs to give you a brief summary. we have a standards tab here, and within here this is where you can specify metadata standards such as EGMS, Gemini, Inspire, and so on, depending on what's been configured for your implementation of Origin. And this allows you to basically tag the dataset with metadata in a standard way. The Geographies tab shows you what geographies have been configured for this dataset. In this case we have middle super output areas and local authorities, but this is where we could add in additional geographies if it was needed to that dataset. But at this point we're actually going to now look at the variables for the dataset. Variables, which you may know as indicators, is basically the definition of the data that we're going to store for this dataset. So, looking at the dataset, we can see that we have really three indicators of data. So within Origin we have the capability of creating a structure for our data. Origin supports multiple variables, and variables support multiple dimensions. This allows us to decide how to structure the dataset. We can either create one variable with three dimensions, or we can create three variables, each with having one dimension. How you structure the dataset is really up to you as the data custodian. There are benefits for doing it one way over the other, especially when it comes to things like data standardization, which we'll cover in some of the later exercises. So for this example, what I'm going to do is create one variable called New Deal, and in it put in a dimension for young people, 25 plus, and lone parents. So if we go back to the dataset management, first thing we're going to do is click the Create New Variable button. This then presents us with the Edit Variable Definition screen, which allows us to add detailed metadata at the variable level. This is additional metadata on top of the dataset. So as you can see, we can actually add quite a granular level of metadata for our datasets. So first off, I'm going to enter in the variable name. New Deal starts by gender. Code is an optional field. It's not visible to the end user, but something that you might find useful yourself. Standardization and ranking I'll come back to in one of the later exercises. And category is how do you want to categorize this variable. So imagine previously in the dataset screen we had a theme for our overall dataset, and we in addition to that can have a category for each variable in the dataset. And this is very useful when it comes to datasets that can span many different themes or topics. So for this I'm just going to put it into economic well-being. You can see we have another number of checkboxes. We can archive the variable itself. We can lock the variable. This will prevent accidental deletion. And we have some metadata on notifying when the system will notify you as the custodian of the next update. And I'll come back to this later in the exercise. We then have detailed notes, which again allow you to enter more descriptive text. We have export notes, which are summary notes that should be available to users when they export the dataset. And we can also add in keywords which help you index the dataset. I'm going to leave that all blank for now and just click the Save Changes. And that's the high-level metadata for the variable configured. Now we have to configure the three dimensions that we see within the Excel document. So I'm simply going to click the Dimensions tab, which will then present a screen allowing us to set up each indicator in the system. So I'm going to insert a row, and we are then presented with a form that allows us to set up each of the three indicators. So we're going to complete the dimension name, the data type, the code, which in this case is going to be a column mapping from Excel, the null description, which is a message, an optional message that we can enter that will be displayed to users if a cell in the Excel document is blank, and finally a checkbox to indicate whether this dimension should be displayed on screen or not to the end users. So if I flick into the Excel document, we can see that the three indicators appear in columns I, J and K. So I'm just going to copy the text, paste that into the dimension name for the first indicator. It is a whole number, and that's going to be mapped to column I. The next one, New Deal 25 Plus, we'll copy that. And this one we're going to map to column J, again as a whole number. And then the final one we're going to map to column K. I'm copying and pasting just for quickness. You can obviously change the text to be anything that you feel is appropriate. But at this point we have now completed the configuration of the one variable with these three dimensions or indicators within it. At this point we're going to just return then to the data set to complete our data upload and configuration. So now to actually import the data, we're going to click on the Import Data tab. This presents us first of all with a number of instructions asking us to configure the data set for import. So we need to know which row the data starts in. If we look at the Excel document, we can see in this case it starts in row 7. And we also going to want to know which column to look in for geographies, because the system is going to have to scan this document and do a mapping exercise to determine which row corresponds to which geography. So we know that data is in row 7, geographies are in column E. We jump back into our form and we specify row 7, column E. We then are asked to define what the worksheet is called. So I'm just going to call it data. And then we're asked to complete any of the any of the variable mappings. Now, because whenever I was setting up each of these dimensions, I already specified I, J and K, the system has already picked up on that and placed the mappings in place. So as long as I just do a double check, my worksheet here is called data and my data is in columns J, I, J and K. So I'm just going to simply click Save Changes to confirm that. And that's us ready to upload data. We could also look at the geography configuration, but because we're using standard ONS coding, where we don't need to actually go and change any of the references for geographies. But worth bearing in mind that this can be changed, so if your source document, your source Excel document, didn't use codes and used text or words, you could easily replace that. But at this point we're now going to actually do the data uploading. So we click on the Import Tool tab and we're presented with a very simple form that asks us what is the time period for this data, and then asks us to specify and upload the actual data set. So I know in this case that the data is 2008. I'm going to specify that. I'm going to browse the data, browse my file system, and there's the dataset, and we're ready to go. Once you click the button, depending on the size of the file, the system is going to upload that and process it according to the specification that we've just went through. Once it's completed, what we call a batch record is created. So we can see that this data has inserted 429 records, which should be the equivalent of the number of middle super output areas times the number of dimensions, and it's just a note of who did the upload. So now we want to actually view the data that's been uploaded, just to give it a spot check. So I'm going to go into the Security and Access tab. This is where we would specify the security and access for the dataset. I'm just going to spend a moment taking you through the different security options here. We use what is called a role-based security model to determine both who should have access to the data and where it should be available. We have what we call a number of different roles. We have what we call control roles, which control the access to different geographic levels. We have data roles that specify which users should have access to this data set. We have groups. This specifies which groups, in other words, which themes or projects that this data set will be available under. We have markings, which are really for information only, but can be used to specify protective markings for data. And then we have portals, which can be used to specify which portals that this data set should be available under. So for this example, we're not going to set control roles. We're going to specify that it's available only to test data, in other words, to other test users. We're going to put it under the test data theme. I could put it under other themes if they're available to me here. And I'm going to put it within the dark training portal. A quick note on the portal: by default, all datasets are available within the master portal. So specifying portals are really a method to allow you to put a dataset within additional portals, and only available if your system is running the partner portals module. So having specified those security roles, I'm then just going to click the Save Security, and that's it. The dataset is now available for us to preview. So to preview it, we're going to go into the data browser available under the Tools and Reports, and within here the system should list all available datasets, which we can either filter by category or theme, or if you know the name, you can go straight to the dataset in question. So I'm going to scroll down here, and there we go, New Deal Program. Bear in mind that this being the training system, you might find duplicate datasets, which is why it's useful really to postfix your dataset names with your own initials. From here I can view additional metadata, or I can indeed browse the actual data, which will be presented in the data viewer in tabular form. And that's it. That's us having now completed the first exercise of importing and configuring a simple dataset. At this point, you can return to the dataset manager, where all of your datasets are listed. If you want to make any further security or configuration changes, you simply locate the dataset that you want. In this case, the New Deal program is the only one listed, and you simply click the edit action, and the dataset metadata and all other configuration data is listed for you to change as required. So in this case, you may want to go into security and change the access to make it available to a wider audience, or whatever is appropriate for your dataset. And that completes this dataset exercise.